Hey, today I'm going to show you how I make my protein pudding / ice cream recipe. This is a really variable recipe and there's a lot of different variations you can do. Today I'm doing my keto recipe because I'm doing keto right now. So this is going to be a salty chocolate peanut butter recipe. This isn't going to be a very sweet dish, it's going to be more rich and salty. But I'll talk about what you can do with it later if you want to add a bit of sweetness. So the first thing we're going to do is start off with 100 grams of Greek yogurt. You can add more or less here. You can add as little as 80 grams or up to even 200, but pay attention to the grams of carbs in your yogurt because this is going to be where most of the carbs from this recipe come from. If there's too many carbs in your yogurt or you just want less yogurt, that's okay. You can just add more liquid later on and it'll still thicken up. Next, I'm going to add in 1 scoop, which is 33 grams of this Garden of Life vegan chocolate flavored protein powder. And this has 5 grams of carbs, that's 2 net grams per scoop. If you don't have vegan protein powder, you can maybe use casein protein, but the point is, whey isn't going to work. This vegan protein powder and casein as well, they both thicken up, and whey isn't going to. Next, I'll add about 5 grams of cocoa powder, then somewhere north of 15 grams of peanut butter. I ended up adding about 24 grams of peanut butter here, which is quite a bit, but I like it peanut buttery, so that's fine. Next, a bit of salt. I add quite a bit of salt here, about a 1/4 teaspoon. You don't have to make it that salty, I just like a lot of salt with the peanut butter, and this is unsalted peanut butter I'm using, but you should add a bit of salt. Next, what I would normally add is 2 scoops, which I think is about 1.5 teaspoons, 2 teaspoons of psyllium husk fiber, but just to change things up this time, I'm going to add about 8 grams of chia seeds instead. Spoiler alert, this ends up really changing the texture. If psyllium fiber is like flour or starch, then adding chia seeds is almost like adding gelatin or pectin. It's just a smoother, creamier texture in the end. This part is optional. You don't really need to add either psyllium or chia seeds here, but it does help with thickening. And it's a good way to get in some fiber if you're doing keto. After you have all your ingredients in a bowl, really gently and carefully start to mix it in and turn all of those ingredients into a paste. Once you can safely move your spoon around without worrying about a powder volcano, you can add your liquid. In my case, I'm going to add this unsweetened vanilla flavored cashew milk, but you could use regular milk or even water, or I've even poured off some of the whey that separates out of the yogurt and sits on the top. You want to start out with about 1/4 cup here. You don't want to add too much too fast. Once this starts to thin out, it'll really go fast. So then just keep adding a little bit at a time and mixing it in. And what you want to do is get it a little bit runnier than you would like it to be. I like mine pretty thick. So here I'm thinking it looks pretty good. So I'm going to add a little bit more. And because I feel like having it a little bit runnier today, I'm going to get it pretty runny here. Now that you can see that it's pretty liquidy and dripping off the spoon here, I'm going to call that good. Now just take this and pop it in the fridge or freezer for a ½ hour to an hour. If you're putting it in the freezer, give it a stir and scrape the sides of the bowl every 10 minutes or so, just so that it all cools down evenly. If you're leaving it in the fridge, you're going to end up with more of a pudding. If you leave it in the freezer long enough, you'll get a more ice cream consistency. I had mine in the freezer, and here it is after somewhere around 45 minutes. Sorry about the light show, I'm not sure what was going on with the camera here. You can see I have this really delicious, soft, ice creamy texture now. So at this point, you can eat it or top it with whatever you want. I'm going to throw on some PB2 powdered peanut butter, just to get it extra peanut buttery. And I'm going to sprinkle a bit more salt on top of that as well, because I feel like salt and peanut butter really go well together. And then I'm just going to splash a little bit more liquid on top of this, a little bit more of my cashew milk. That'll mix in with the peanut butter powder a little bit and add a little bit more creaminess to this ice cream texture that I've ended up with. Now, when you're making this, if you want it to be a little bit sweeter, you can add some sweetener when you mix in your dry ingredients. Or what I sometimes do is I have a vanilla whey protein powder from Costco, and that's made with sucralose. It's very sweet, so even just a little bit of that and that really sweetens it up. But I don't feel like a salty peanut butter dish needs to be any sweeter, so for this one I don't bother. Now altogether this recipe came out to 409 calories, that's 18.6 grams of fat, with 19.9 grams of total carbohydrates, that's 10.4 net grams after subtracting fiber, and 40.4 grams of protein. And that's not including my toppings at the end. If instead you used psyllium, and you managed to show a little bit more restraint than I did and stuck with 15 grams of peanut butter, then the recipe comes to 322 calories. That's 11.5 grams of fat, 17.3 grams of carbohydrates, that's 9 net carbs after subtracting fiber, and 36.8 grams of protein. Keep in mind this is the all-natural, peanuts-only kind of peanut butter, not the sugary kind. And I can tell you this bowl was delicious, and as I sit here narrating this, I'm looking forward to making another one.